I'm sorry. If I am ever in a thumbnail that looks remotely like this, with the title of the video being this, I would unalive myself. No, it's not under the live tab. See? One would think. But here we go.
Let's go back to your concern.
I am one of the LGBTQ extremists, I assume. Let's hear what Anna has to say about me.
Is he's not going to go away. Okay. Some will say Obama's not gone away. Okay. Some Republicans will say Obama is still around and Obama's running, aside from trying to do stuff what he's doing with his chef, but he's still around. With Biden, encourage him to do that. Now that could be right, that could be wrong, and you can debate it, but no one knows 100%. Both sides are going to kind of be like, no way, Obama's living his life, and this whole concept about Michelle running again, it's never going to happen. Fine. It's a good topic that we can debate. And for you to say, I think he's not going to go away, I actually don't know if I disagree that he's not going to go away. But I think the way he's not going to go away is like a founder of a company is so concerned about
Appreciate
the
that.
policies that he put in place that he doesn't want the people that come after him to eliminate those policies. Like, do I think Bush cares? I don't really think Bush cares. Like, listen, I'm done. Leave me alone. I'm gone. I don't want to come and say stuff. Let me just go do my own thing, right? Do I think Hillary cares? Yes. Do I think Bill Clinton cared? I really don't think Bill Clinton cared. I think Bill Clinton's like, let me go do whatever I'm doing, right? I think Obama cares, and I think Trump cares, both of them. They're both legacy people, which is like, hey, you cannot undermine my legacy. Is it a valid enough of a concern to be that worried about it? I don't know. The part I would bring back to you is the following. It's been very interesting seeing how you're reacting to strange things and communities targeting you. For example, Anna Kasparian doubles down after, this is earlier, this is like 6 months ago, after bashing trans-inclusive term birthing person as degrading to women. Okay, now somebody's going to be like, well, wait a minute. Anna would never. Is this the same Anna from Young? That's not possible. That can't be. This is a mistake. This is a fake story, right? She would never debate birthing person. She should be okay with that. But no, progressive media host Anna Kasparian stood firm in her criticism of the term birthing person as degrading to women.
I just, real quick, just for my sanity. See. Okay, this is from March of this year, all right? This is from March of this year, all right? Hi, Anna Kasparian. What do you want AOC to say instead of people who menstruate when she's talking about people who menstruate that is trans-inclusive and doesn't offend you as a woman? You said there must be a better way. What is that? Anna Kasparian responds, can I ask a question in good faith? If being referred to as a biological woman in the context of healthcare is offensive to trans men, why is it somehow less offensive to refer to them by mentioning body parts that belong to biological women? How is person with a uterus better? And I respond, person with a uterus is specific, inclusive, and doesn't lead to negative health outcomes. The studies on this show that using gendered language for healthcare leads to significant percentages of transgender and intersex people not receiving necessary care, sometimes fatally. And Anna responded, thank you, Jack. I appreciate and respect your response. Which, would indicate that she has received, and I'm by no means alone in this, but I can absolutely guarantee you that people have explained this to her. Because I have. And I know that she saw my response. So, the reason these inclusive language decisions are being made is to improve the health outcomes of trans people or gender nonconforming people. To ensure that doctors aren't making assumptions, because sometimes when doctors are making assumptions based on how someone presents, that assumption can get people killed. It can lead to suboptimal care, it can lead to more suffering, and it can ultimately lead, in some cases, to fatalities. So, that is why this inclusive language exists, and that's been made clear to Anna. So the fact that she's continuing to go back to this indicates to me she either doesn't believe that that is the case, and I haven't seen her produce any evidence, that shows that that isn't the case, or she just doesn't care because she ultimately is like, well, this makes me uncomfortable, and so it just shouldn't be. Which is deeply disappointing, especially as someone to someone like me who looked up to Anna for a very long time, and I've had her on my show multiple times. It hurts. So just to kind of clear that up, because people have talked to her about this, I've talked to her about this, I've been extraordinarily clear, and yet she continues to come back to the exact same well with no explanation whatsoever.
She responded to backlash with humor, stating, laughing out loud, the meltdowns over wanting to be referred to as a woman rather than a birthing person is pretty wild, and emphasized her refusal to apologize, saying, I'll never apologize for that, especially as a biological woman who has had the effing lifetime of being told I'm less than. Some progressive criticized Kasparian for her stance, comparing her to J.K. Rowling and accusing her of bigotry. Transgender activists clarified that the term birthing person was not used to describe individual women, but rather to include trans men and non-binary people in discussions about pregnancy. So I listened to this. I'm like, okay.
I love that as he's saying that, he rolled his eyes. Did you guys catch that?
And non-binary people in discussions about pregnancy. So I listened to this. I'm like, okay. If a person doesn't know you, but they know of you and you're with Young Turks, they're typical criticism in my Armenian community circle. I'll just kind of, it's not like you don't know it. How could she work with the guy that said such and such about Armenian genocide? Okay, cool. I've heard that a million times. She's a socialist, Bernie Sanders, da-da-da. Okay. She's a Trump, what's the TDS, whatever.
Derangement syndrome.
Yeah, she's part of, she's this, she's that. Okay, that's the criticism when, friends are talking. I said, okay, cool. But then this kind of brings it out to like, no, she is actually not wanting to be bullied and categorized and cornered, to have to agree with everything that's taken.
The weird thing is, I don't know what she got from all this mess. The chat and the podcast ripped on her all night. At no point did they listen to her. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what she's getting out of this. That's my main point of confusion here. Other than like maybe she like this is the issue. This is the wedge issue that worked on her. And maybe she's just a true believer in that sense, and is just so stubborn that she's willing to like see it through no matter what. Because I don't think she's benefiting out of going on this show at all. In fact, this show is benefiting by being able to use her as a prop to essentially be like, see, the left is even the hardest core people on the left are realizing that the LGBTQ has gone too far.
Place. So you're almost...
Anna's always been a weak debater. I disagree. I think that when she went and debated Ben Shapiro, I think she did a really good job.
Experiencing a little bit of what Trump experienced as an individual, that they're now attacking you.
Yeah.
And you've been for some of these guys, but now they're coming after you. So do you kind of see yourself saying, look, I don't know.
And to be clear, I don't think she's evil or anything. I just don't understand. I genuinely don't understand her like that this is the hill that she has decided to die on. I don't get it. I just don't. And that's part of what fascinates me about this entire situation.
either I'm not the Anna of who I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Maybe I'm also maturing with some of my policies, maybe, or growing with some of my policies. Or no, I'm not the Democrat of 3 years ago or socialist of 5 years ago. I'm also evolving today. What's going on with your transition?
Well, hold that thought for a second, because I'm going to answer that question.
Please.
But before I do, I want to address one other thing, which is how much of a badass I am. Okay.
Wait, she went on Joe Rogan? I didn't know that. If I'm going to be completely honest, I know that there has been a theory about a TYT gas leak. I don't think it's a TYT gas leak. I think it's a Joe Rogan gas leak. Okay? I think Joe Rogan has like this ability to just degrade brain cells. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know exactly what it is, but a lot of the people who like are looking up to that show in particular seem to go down in just weird directions. I just, it, and I know that Anna has talked about like, having a lot of respect for Joe Rogan, and maybe it's just it finally got her. I don't know.
And the reason why I say that is because I single-handedly persuaded the most well-known Turkish American, Cenk Uygur, to, on his show multiple times, acknowledge the Armenian genocide. I did that, okay? I could have just given him the middle finger and said, you're a Turk. I don't work for Turks. I'm an Armenian. And I could have just demonized him for what he wrote when he was literally in college. He was a dumb college student who had a lifetime of Turkish propaganda in his head about the Armenian genocide. And I decided, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to persuade.
This is I'm sorry, like, this is a baffling way to answer what someone just leveled at her. Like, he asked her a question about, LGBTQ activists and like trans inclusive language, and she answered by talking about her standing up for what is right against someone who had engaged in genocide denial. Is that comparable here? Because I don't think it is at all.
Persuade him of what the actual truth is. And I did that. And I give myself a lot of credit. No one else does. Armenians don't. But I'm going to give myself credit, because persuading people, doing the hard work of persuading people, that takes effort, that takes strength. And we don't have a lot of that in America right now. We have a lot of crying and whining about people not agreeing with each other, and then everyone goes off.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of crying and whining in this 30-minute long segment we found ourselves in. But not from me.
In their own corner. Everyone takes their ball and they go home, okay? So, to answer your question, you are correct. I do not like to be bullied or pressured into saying things or believing things that I do not believe. I find that terminology degrading. Okay?
Why?
Because I'm not a birthing person, okay? I'm a woman.
What's wrong with being called a birthing person?
Well, first of all, not all women even have the capacity to get pregnant. So
then they can disregard the advice for birthing people. If that's the first thing that you're going with, Anna, birthing people are people who can birth. And birthing people come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and genders. So it is, in fact, de-essentializing the idea of birth and womanhood. And if she's like, well, some women can't even give birth. Yeah, because birthing person isn't a term to replace woman. It's a term to broaden and more accurately define a group that exists outside of the group of women and might in fact exclude some women.
It's degrading to them to be essentially to have their womanhood questioned if they
It is not questioning their womanhood, it's just saying they aren't birthing people, which would be accurate as they can't give birth.
like they're not
What a point.
unable if they're unable to have kids to begin with. But also, I mean, look, this is the thing that annoys me about this entire issue and conversation, because they'll turn around and they'll say, no one's calling you a birthing person. Okay, does someone need to call an individual who finds the N-word offensive the N-word in order for him or her to find it offensive?
Being she thinks that having a distinguished category for people who can give birth is on par with the N-word, a word that was used for centuries to denigrate Black people. No, this isn't even debate brain discordant wool. This is just the lines of logic here are non-existent. Are non-existent. They aren't real. The N-word is not comparable to a medical classification designed to give people more accurate medical advice.
Or degrading. You get what I'm saying?
Of course.
No one needs to be called that word to find it problematic or to have an issue with it. And besides which, I was called that, okay? Yes, in a medical setting, but this is a doctor who knows I'm a biological woman. Call me a...
It's from a doctor who knows that you're a biological woman, but it's very likely that they're getting new standards of care in order to avoid making dangerous assumptions that put other people's health at risk. It's not just about you, it's about the entire system of how healthcare is delivered, which is something you should know as someone who, advocates for Medicare for all. You should know that. The doctor is giving you advice because that's part of what is going through the system right now, is how to implement better practices that help people get better care. That's what happens. And you might think that that's weird, but ultimately, you thinking it's weird is not necessarily as important as ensuring that everyone gets the care that they need and doesn't die due to medical malpractice.
A woman. But I had a conversation with that doctor. Why did you feel the need to call me a birthing person? Where did that come from? And in California, medical providers are basically told that there will be penalties if they don't use the proper terminology or if they're caught doing anything discriminatory toward the trans community. Now, if they're actually doing something discriminatory toward the trans community, I think medical providers absolutely should face consequences.
75% of trans people report having issues in medical healthcare settings. That is such an absurdly common problem that it affects the majority of trans people when we go to the doctor or the hospital. That is why these standards of care are changing, so that we don't run into all of these problems in healthcare contexts. That, like... Yeah, no, Jess, that's what I'm saying, right? I think Joe Rogan is like the gateway drug into these right-wing circles, and I think that like she listened to too much Joe Rogan and has internalized a lot of these conservative talking points. You know, if you just turn your like guys, real talk, if you just turn your brain off and you listen to a lot of conservative talk radio over and over and over and over again and make that like a daily routine, that's going to have knock-on effects in your brain. What you choose to watch and how you choose to watch it affects how you think and perceive the world. So if you are uncritically just watching stuff or listening to stuff, it's going to affect how you perceive the world and how you interpret the world. Yeah, or make it your background noise for something. It is going to affect you. And so your goal should be that, you know, find stuff that will affect you in positive ways. You know, stuff that will build you up, stuff that will actually like inform your understanding of things. But if you're listening to right-wing media and Joe Rogan, you are not getting like a background radiation of like helpful information. Yeah, you should apply critical thinking. I can't, that the idea that like, oh yeah, well they'll get in trouble if they're seen as discriminating against trans people. And she's like, well, they should. But that's why the new practices were put in place, right? Like, just think about it. Like, you can, everything she says here, if you take it on like just point blank good faith, she's not lying, which I don't think she is, you find that like her argument is essentially like, well, yeah, if trans people are discriminated against in healthcare settings, there should be punishments for that. And guess what? Trans people are disproportionately, discriminated against in healthcare settings, and there are punishments for that. And in order to avoid punishments, the system has implemented new changes that require more specific phrasing in order to ensure that trans people get the care that they need in healthcare settings and aren't discriminated against. But she's upset about that more specific language and doesn't want it implemented and finds it deeply offensive when the specificity of that language exists specifically to avoid the discrimination she says she's against. The line of logic is there, she's just not using it for some reason. And I think it ultimately boils down to she just doesn't want to. Because she's comfortable with her, level of discomfort and doesn't want to question that.
But the idea that we should change all of our terminology, even toward women who want to be called women, in order to be inclusive is ridiculous to me. Now, if a transgender person wants to be...
Again, birthing person isn't a term to replace women. It's a more specific term for medical and policy level decisions that ensures that no one's falling between the cracks.
You called that? Fantastic. I respect it. I'll do it. I'll engage in it. But I think in the context of my relationship with my doctors, I want to be called a woman. It's not that difficult.
And I will say, you can do that. You can, like, if your doctor says, this is for birthing people, blah, 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 and you're like, oh, well, I'd prefer to be called, you can just call me a woman. Doctors will generally respect that. Doctors aren't going to be like, oh, no, we can't call you a woman because the transes will get mad. No, they'll just call you a woman. They'll just mark it on their sheet, and that note will go around to the other doctors, and it'll be fine. And if you run into that issue with another doctor, you can just be like, hey, I'd prefer to be called a woman instead of birthing person. And okay, like they will accommodate that. So again, the issue here is, sorry, I know I'm being a pause champ. So again, the issue here isn't even that like, oh, I want to be called a woman, but doctors refuse to do it. No, the issue is like, oh, you have to clarify to like a new doctor that you want to be referred to as a woman instead of like by biological processes that may or may not apply to your body. The horror, you go to the hospital, you have to have like four conversations for the duration of your stay. Oh no. Yeah, like did her doctor like pull a gun on her and tell her to shut the fuck up? No. And if it did, like she should report that to the police.
It is my personal preference, okay? That doesn't mean that I in any way believe that transgender people should be treated differently or that they should be discriminated against or that they...
You just compared this language, this gender-inclusive language that is designed to include trans people in medical settings and on policy decisions. You just compared that to the N-word. You just compared that to the most offensive, arguably the most offensive word in the entire English language. And to debating someone out of genocide denial. Like, and then you have the audacity to go and say, like,
I want to be called a woman. It's not that difficult. It is my personal preference.
If it's your personal preference, and your criticism of it is that it is on par with saying the N-word, then clearly your position would be this should not be a standard of care in healthcare settings. But if you truly are, like, on board with trans people having and receiving care, appropriate levels of care that is non-discriminatory in healthcare settings, then you should be fine with this language.
Okay? That doesn't mean that I in any way believe that transgender people should be treated differently or that they should be discriminated against.
The language is designed to prevent that. That's why it exists.
Or that they should not live lives of dignity. I have had an entire career defending them, supporting them, and this one issue led to ridiculous outrage among a fringe component of that community.
I mean, look, part of it is, you can't say, oh, this led to ridiculous outrage, when you open this conversation by comparing it to comparing gender-inclusive language to the N-word and genocide denial. Like that's on you. You're like, oh, well, people are getting all up in arms about this and getting really hyperbolic and wild. Well, then maybe don't open the conversation by comparing it to two of the most inflammatory things a human being could possibly do.
Community. They are not representative of the entire transgender community. And for that fringe component, if they think that they're going to shut me up and force me to say things I don't believe, they've got another thing coming. Okay? I'm going to say what I think.
Oh, no one believes that you're saying things you don't believe. They just are saying that the things you are believing and saying are wrong and obviously contradicted by the other things you say and claim to believe. So that's what people are pointing out.
Every single time.
Do you think they're crossing the line a little bit and it's getting a little bit too ridiculous in certain sectors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
they turn people off with it. And again, it is a fringe component of the transgender community. And they don't even...
I would really like, because Anna and Jenk both talk about the fringe transgender community. I'd really like them to go into more detail about what exactly they consider the fringe transgender community. Am I part of the fringe transgender community? I don't know. What are the fringe transgender beliefs?
Even realize how counterproductive they're being.
And who's allowed for that to happen? Who's who's been a part of that becoming a reality? Who do you think?
Look, I think most people want to do the right thing. Okay. And so they want to be as accepting and tolerant and inclusive as possible. And they don't want to come across as being in any way discriminatory. And I respect that. I think that it comes from a good place, but they shut their brains off sometimes and just go along with things without considering maybe some of the unexpected consequences, how others might feel about what they're engaging in. I think that there's this conflation with the gay community and the transgender community, because think about it. Like, I think a lot of people on the left think of the trans community the same way they thought of the gay community, right? Like, yeah, why not legalize gay marriage? Like, what's wrong with that? Who's it hurting? But when it comes to some transgender issues, there is a lot on the line, right? Like, when we do talk about kids transitioning, you want to make sure that we have a system in place where there's a proper protocol implemented to ensure that we're not transitioning kids who might not actually be transgender.
Yeah, because as we all know, kids just walk into a gender clinic and the people behind the front desk just take out like a t-shirt cannon bazooka that showers them with like estrogen or testosterone. We all know that's how that works. There's no process right now at all for trans kids to go through for any of this medical care. Oh wait, no, there's a prolonged years-long process to get this type of medical care. This is a years-long process that involves multiple medical professionals. Now, if someone turns 18, well, guess what? They have the full legal right to bodily autonomy. They can do whatever they want with their body. They can go do informed consent and get on HRT like the same day, all right? But if they're under 18, you can't do that. There is a process in place already. And by the way, like, I sympathize with the, like, with being like, oh yeah, we want to make sure that this is as safe as possible. We want to make sure that transitioning for kids is safe.
I'm tired of your bullshit, Anna.
Kyrie, thank you for the 3 gifted tier 1 subs. I very, very much appreciate that. But, like, it's not... If you are making statements about how, you know, there needs to be a safe process, there needs to be blank and blank and blank in order to be, for this thing to be good, then you should be damn sure when you say those things that those processes and those safety checks aren't already in place. Because otherwise, you're falling into a pretty interesting little trap where essentially you are saying that this medical practice is unsafe, it is unsound, when in reality it is safe and has the checks that you already want it to have. I've done the research. To me, it looks like it has enough checks on it. A lot of the research papers that I've seen indicate that the long-term happiness of people who transition during childhood is overwhelmingly positive. And what people who make the argument that Anna just made here generally tend to say is that, oh, well, you know, we don't have enough data. You know, in like 10 to 15 years, who's to say we aren't going to have a massive epidemic of, you know, kids who are wrongfully transitioned, and that's going to be a direct result of having no proper oversight over this process. But the reality is, like, there's no evidence to indicate that that is coming at all. That this, that there is going to be this massive wave, this tsunami of wrongfully transitioned people. And I mean, like, at the end of the day, if you want to imagine scary possible futures, you can. But I don't think that's a good bar on which to create policy or to prevent people from getting medical care that they need. You know, like, that's ultimately, I don't think using someone's fantasy of a possible bad thing happening, I don't think that that is the same as having actual real-world data. Yeah, what if all the evidence we've ever had suddenly flips? Yeah, what if suddenly one day we send a man up into space and he looks down and he sees that the planet is flat? He'll sure look silly then.
Do you think it's okay to transition kids under the age of 18, even if the parents consent?
What do you mean, medically?
Medically. Anna, you seem very smart to me.
Oh, okay. She's just point blank against kids transitioning.
And I think you have common sense.
Yeah, I do have common sense. I think it's a very difficult question to answer. Okay? I think that it is a problem when certain states
did just notice what happened here. Just notice he asked her a question and then proceeded to stroke her ego in order to get her to answer it, right? Just real quick.
Anna, you seem very smart to me. And I think you're under the age of 18, even if the parents consent.
Question.
What do you mean, medically?
Medically. Anna, you seem very smart to me. And I think you have common sense.
Yeah, I do have common sense. I
drops a couple of compliments in there.
Very difficult question to answer. Okay? I think that it is a problem when certain states completely ban it, because there are instances of, let's say, teenagers who identify as transgender, they're legitimately transgender, and I don't want to cause harm to those people, right? I think it's a decision that should be left between the parents and the doctors. But at the same time, there are certain things going on where I do worry. Like, I don't know if you guys have read.
You know, it's really interesting, right? Like, she gets to the correct answer, which is that ultimately a decision that is that life-changing and personal belongs between, like, parents, doctors, and patient, you know? And then she adds the but.
About the Tavistock clinic in the UK that's shut down. And the reason why it shut down is because it just became this system of transitioning minors without really doing the proper protocols to ensure that they're working with people who are legitimately transgender.
Okay, so you're 14 years old. I don't know if you said 14 or 13 years old. When your mom tells you, what do you want to be? You said, I want to go be an actress. So she's not going to be a Pachatsats, right? And you said, I'm going to go be a Barbara Walters. Why don't you go be a journalist? Okay, that's exactly what I want to do. And I go, okay. What if your mom doesn't say that to you?
Very interestingly, people bring up the Tavistock clinic quite often. Just real quick, we're going to take a look at this. Why the Tavistock Gender Clinic is actually closing and what it means for young trans people. The Gender Identity Development Service, GIDS, at the Tavistock was a groundbreaking institution when it was established as NHS England's sole provider of care for trans and gender questioning young people in 1989. But as the years wore on, cracks began to develop on the surface, exposing faults in the way the NHS treats trans youth healthcare. Waiting lists spiraled, with young people now forced to wait years before they can see a specialist. Eventually, it was decided that having a single provider for trans youth care across the country wasn't safe or sustainable. Last July, NHS England announced the Tavistock Clinic would be shutting down by spring of 2023 to be replaced by at least 2 regional service centers. The move came after GIDS was criticized in an independent review led by Dr. Hilary Cass, who called for care to become more integrated and more easily accessible. However, as the closure date looms, there are reportedly no locations, staff, or services yet in place. This has left thousands of trans youth and their families in limbo as the future of gender-affirming healthcare through NHS England. The decision to close GIDS was designed to improve access to gender-affirming care for young people. However, the press have continued to frame the decision as a win in their war on trans lives. For years, media outlets have made GIDS the target of criticism and salacious claims. News of the closure prompted a wave of celebratory and misleading headlines, prompting Dr. Cass to issue a statement in support of GIDS. Nonetheless, as recently as February 2023, a Telegraph columnist heralded the clinic's closure as the beginning of the end for the cult of trans. Whether it's healthcare, sport, or participation in society, the existence of trans people continues to be a source of toxic discussion in the British press, and Tavistock has been swept into the furor. So, yeah. This is the short summary here, which you will notice is not, oh, the Tavistock clinic was just transing too many kids, and so it had to be closed because of its dangerous transitionary practices, which is how Anna framed it here. But when you look into the actual reason why the clinic is closing, it has nothing to do with, like, wrongfully transitioned patients. That's so interesting to me.
What if your mom doesn't put that in your head? What if you go into Hollywood? Maybe your life's going to be a different story today. I don't know what it's going to be, good, bad, or ugly, but it's going to be a different life.
That's probably what.
But what I'm saying is, it's going to be a very different life. I actually think you would, because you have drive, but it's going to be a different life, no matter what direction you would have gone to. But the point I want to make is with this whole concept of even entertaining the thought of it being okay before the age of 18. You know, then that means, like, my idea, I have a controversial idea. I would rather have a 15-year-old kid that has a job paying taxes vote than a 28-year-old person who's never had a job, never paid taxes. That person shouldn't vote. So Pumpy says, you're out of your mind. I get it. It's not.
How did you go from like teenagers transitioning to wanting to restrict voting rights to 28-year-olds without jobs? What are you talking about, dude?
Not a normal idea that I'm proposing. You have the right to say you're out of your mind. But what my idea is, I want to give people the right to vote who earned the right to vote, who have contributed to society, minus those who have disabilities, things like that. That's not what I'm talking about.
How did he... I'm sorry, this pivot is insane. How did this happen?
Talking about, or elderly. All I'm talking about is a 15-year-old person should have the right to vote, who is paying taxes, has a W-2 job, has paid $3,000 of taxes, whatever, versus 28-year-old who hasn't. But this concept of saying, yeah, I think my son told me, he's a girl, and we have to do this, and da-da-da-da, and they're crying, getting emotional. I think we have to be a little less tolerant to stupidity and insanity. If you're 19 years old and you say, like my kids will say, that my son is having this tattoo conversation with me. Here we go. And you know which son it is. He's like, hey, but such and such has tattoos. I said, but Michael Jordan didn't have tattoos. He said, that's a good point. I said, Brady doesn't have tattoos. By the way, I hope these guys don't have tattoos in weird places. All I know is I've never seen tattoos. Yeah. You don't know. Michael could have a tattoo of goat somewhere you're never gonna see. But all I'm saying is these guys will like, what about this? And what if I want to get it? I'm like, dude, let me just put it to you this way. When you're 18, you can get it. Till then, I'm not going to support you getting a tattoo. After that, do your thing. My goal is to try to encourage you, and as much as I can, to one day not do this, right?
Right. I mean, but that's your parental right. Okay? So I think that I get uncomfortable getting in between a parent, their child, and their doctor, right? I actually do believe in parental rights. And so I do have an issue with some of these schools and school districts promoting policies of keeping parents.
Look, like Sheckley, that was spinning around in my brain too, and it's just like I think that's very telling about what they how they conceptualize, how conservatives conceptualize trans care, right? Like in his best case scenario, getting trans affirming care is like getting a tattoo. It's like an optional thing that makes people feel good, that they just want, but the reality is that, like, not getting trans affirming care puts their lives at risk. You know, like it is permanent changes happen whether or not you get trans affirming care, right? The question is whether those permanent changes are going to be positive for the individual patient or negative. And, well, if they're negative, then it makes them want to die. Like, at the end of the day, that's what it means. We're talking about whether or not someone wants to live or wants to die. This isn't at all comparable to tattoos. This is medical care that they need. Otherwise, they will live a significantly diminished life, either temporally or fulfillingly. Yeah. It's not comparable to tattoos, but that is how they think of it.
The dark when it comes to their child transitioning.
That's in the state of California.
And
sometimes,
yes,
yeah.
and the reason why I say that, understand.
Yeah.
Look, I think that, like in
Wait, sorry.
an issue with some of these schools and school districts promoting policies of keeping parents in the dark when it comes to their child transitioning.
Oh, for fuck's sake. For fuck's sake. Keeping parents in the dark when it comes to their child transition. I'm going to let her finish this question, but for fuck's sake.
That's in the state of California. sometimes,
Yes,
yeah.
and the reason why I say that, understand.
Yeah.
Look, I think that, like in the state of Florida, in the legislation that they passed, there are exceptions for kids who might, like, if there's reason to believe that their parents are going to be abusive, if they're informed of this, right? There is a carve out in the legislation in Florida to ensure that the teachers have the ability to withhold that information from an abusive parent or abusive parents. I think that's important because there are cases of parents who are abusive and might be awful to their kids, might maybe beat them, might disown them if they find out they're trans. So that's why I think it is important to have protections for those kids. However, at the same time,
I'm gonna pause that because she said a lot, and I want to be able to get to it. Right? This is bullshit. Right? Like when people talk about like these exceptions, exceptions for in cases like what she's describing, like there's a trans kid at school. First of all, she's in favor of legislation that mandates that teachers report to parents that they think their kid might be trans. That's ghoulish. But second of all, even if you grant, right, that like, oh, well, Florida has these protections that are carved out if you think that parents could be abusive, you understand that parents are going to test those limitations, right? They are going to sue teachers and school districts for withholding that information using that law, and then it puts the onus on the teachers in order to produce evidence as to why they had a reasonable belief that these parents that they may or may not even know could be abusive. Like, that's not a real protection at all. It doesn't protect anyone in that situation. Yeah, exactly. Also, what counts as child abuse? Does denying your child necessary medical care count as abuse? I don't know. The other part of this, though, is that what she's talking about here is that, like, oh, well, schools, it makes me uncomfortable to know that schools could have policies of not reporting whether or not a student is trans to their parents. But here's the thing. If a kid is transitioning at school, that doesn't mean the school is giving them prescriptions for HRT to, like, medically transition. What that means, especially if there's no parental consent going on here, what that means is effectively that they are socially transitioning at school, that they are wearing clothes that they feel comfortable in, that they are going by different pronouns, etc. The school can't just secretly slip them drugs. That's not a thing schools can do. So what she's saying here is like, oh, if the teacher thinks that that kid is acting a little too fruity, well, they should be able to tell those parents. They should be mandated to tell those parents. And it's very similar to like the carve-outs when it comes to like abortions, right? There are exceptions for like life of the mother, or for rape, or for incest. But then you have to consider, what does that actually look like when it's implemented, right? And what it looks like is effectively those exceptions don't exist. Because you have to be able to prove that a rape happened. You have to be able to prove that incest happened. You have to be able to prove that the life of the mother is at risk. And because the bar of evidence to prove those things is so high, those exceptions effectively do not exist. And I think that it is exactly the same when it comes to mandated reporting. And because again, teachers, like my partner is somebody who taught for almost a decade, right? Like I can tell you, teachers don't always know what's going on at home. Teachers can have an idea, but teachers don't always know. There is no way for a teacher to be able to effectively implement this type of exception, which is why schools have traditionally had non-disclosure policies about, you know, if they believe that a student might be gay or trans, they don't tell their parents. They don't mention it to their parents. Because guess what? It's not the parents, like, I'm sorry, like, by the time they're in school, like, it's not their parents' business if their kid is gay or trans. Parents might want to know that, but if they want to know that, they should make sure their kids feel safe enough to tell them those things. That onus is on the parent, not on the school to spy on children for the parent. I know I made that point in a very messy way, but...
We've all acknowledged that the suicide rates among transgender people are high. And if I had a child who started identifying as transgender and I was not informed about it, I would lose my mind because I would be concerned that I'm not there to help with my child's mental health.
But those are two different things. So I want you to go, okay, so are you saying that a parent should have the right to allow their kids to transition and change their sex? You're saying that should be the parent's consent?
Yes, but I do think that there should be protocols in place and safeguards in place in the medical industry.
Let's go one step.
And there are.
Step forward.
Yeah, and by the way, let me be clear. So when we talk about medical transition, I'm not talking about surgeries.
I'm talking surgery and taking the hormones and stuff like that.
No. Okay, so puberty blockers, I think, should not be like outlawed. Okay, so there's puberty blockers.
Oh well, thank you for that gracious position.
And then there are the cross-sex hormones.
Pre-18 puberty blockers you're okay with?
I think in instances where there is a proper protocol in place to ensure.
But I'm not.
So let me wrap up this.
We haven't seen what the outcome of these 20. It hasn't been 20 years to see.
God, sometimes I forget there are literally 3 more chuckle fucks just in case Patrick Bet-David needs to like gang up on a guest. Sometimes I forget that these guys exist specifically to gang up on. Oh God.
How much these kids are going to have suicide. I think at 14 years old, I get what you're saying. The parent.
But but also like preventing them from identifying as trans isn't going to like if they are trans isn't going to lower their suicidality. That's not how that works.
It's your kids. I would never get involved. I could give a suggestion, but to alter a child's biological makeup in the long run, I just don't.
Here's a question.
The
Here's a
thing with
question.
puberty blockers is it depends on how long they're taking it, right? If they're taking it for a long period of time, there are possible side effects that are damaging and it would cause irreparable harm. So I understand where you're
Yeah, like if you're taking puberty blockers from like age 14 to like 18, yeah, there might be some long-term side effects. But if you're taking them from like 10 to 15, like you'll be fine. And also, we have a test case of people who took hormone blockers or puberty blockers for prolonged periods of time and turned out fine. They were invented for precocious puberty. Like, we have that test case already.
When it comes to the surgeries, though, I'm entirely against the surgeries.
Okay, so that's good. So that's good that we have one step. But I want to ask you this question. So you're Armenian. I'm Armenian.
Mm-hmm.
There's another legendary Armenian out there called Jack Kevorkian. I don't know if you know who Jack Kevorkian was. Dr. Death.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Cool. We're gonna go. We're gonna go with Jack Kevorkian, huh? See ya, VCC TV. Yeah, Dr. Death.
Dr. Suicide,
Armenian?
right?
Okay.
He was Armenian, legendary, right?
Also,
They made a movie about him. I think Pacino played or De Niro played. Pacino played him, yeah. So this guy, hey, life is hard. You want to commit suicide? I'll do it for you. Don't worry about it. Life is very hard. So what if we get to a situation where mom and dad consent, son comes, daughter comes saying, life is so freaking hard, I can't do it. I want you to take me to the modern day Jack Kevorkian, okay? And I want you to take my life away. And mom and dad pray on it, and they say, look, if that's what our kid wants, let's go take him.
I mean, look, obviously, I'd be against that because maybe if I
Are they under the impression that there are like no safeguards for like doctor assisted death? Like assisted dying programs? Are they under the impression you can just like walk into like an assisted dying facility and just be like, "Hey, we want to I would like to go now. It is my time." Cuz like you actually can't do that. You have to be like medically evaluated and like actually go through a lengthy medical process between like patient, doctor, any caregivers that are involved as well. Like, yeah, oh yeah, they do. No, unironically, Archangel Decab, they think it's the Futurama suicide booth. They think assisted dying programs are just you walk into a booth and it electrocutes you. Like that's what they think it is, right? Like I've gone over the assisted dying programs here in the United States. They don't work like this. And yes, by the way, there are some minors who take advantage of like assisted dying programs. Minors who like are already undergoing like unimaginable levels of pain and suffering. And they are like evaluated and found to be like able to go through with these programs. Like this is a thing that happens. And you know what else? By the way, when you deny some of these people the right to die, oh god. Let's see. Yeah. What is this story? I remember this in the back of my head. Oh god. What was her name? Do any of you remember this case? There was a case, I think, of a girl in Europe who was trying to get access to an assisted dying program and was denied multiple times and ultimately just stopped accepting food and couldn't be made to eat food. And she passed away as a form of protest. No, I disagree, GamerG. I think assisted dying is a necessary thing in an ethical world, but it needs to have a lot of safeguards on it. Howdy ho, I'm a conservative and Christian. Am I gonna die in here, or can I chill and learn? You can certainly chill and learn. That is what my channel is all about, Delta. Also, chat, if they say something wrong, make sure you don't jump down their throat immediately, okay? Hey, Steady Up. Anyway, we're gonna go back to this. But just know, like, assisted dying programs exist in other countries around the world, and have been used, and they're pretty good. I'd support assisted dying if we didn't live under capitalism and didn't have genocidal actors trying to abuse it. I mean, fair, but also, like, I'm not willing to just say we shouldn't have it and then allow people to suffer for years, you know, with no other way out aside from, like, buying a shotgun and smuggling it into their hospital. You know, like, I just think that it needs to be an option for some people. Yeah, Delta, I have a segment coming out on the YouTube about that. The main thing is, I think that there are a lot of situations in which it can apply and is desperately needed. But again, it needs to come with adequate safeguards, and being poor can't be one of the qualifiers, obviously.
Explain where I'm coming from. You can understand my thoughts on this, right? I want to implement policies that cause the least harm to people, right? Transgender teenagers exist, and suicide rates among transgender people, especially if
I get what she's trying to say here, but it comes out wrong. Like, you want policies not that cause the least amount of harm, but policies that do the most amount of good, you know? The most amount of good while minimizing the amount of harm, obviously. Like, yeah.
if they're not able to
But that's me being nitpicky.
feel comfortable in their own bodies, right? That suicide rate is real. And so how do we balance, okay, the concerns of potentially causing damage to kids who aren't actually transgender? Because that exists, right? There are detransitioners. And my heart breaks for them, because they were on puberty blockers for a long period of time. It did cause harm to their bodies, irreparable harm. And so I feel bad for them, and I want to...
Okay, but here's the thing, right? You feel bad for detransitioners, and you should. You know, they've gone through a process that alienates them from their body, and that's terrible. But you also need to understand something else, which is that every medical intervention has the chance of going wrong or not fixing the underlying issue, right? You can have open heart surgery and it doesn't fix the heart palpitations you were experiencing, you know? That's a thing that can happen. You know, you can have surgery to, like, fix your knee joint, and it doesn't work out, and instead you're left with like a permanent limp. That's a thing that can happen. But no one goes around and says, "Oh, we shouldn't allow people to get open heart surgery because it could not fix the problem. We shouldn't allow people to get surgery on their knees because it could result in a lifelong limp." There is risk in any type of medical intervention, and indeed in any decision you make in your day-to-day life. There is risk. And the issue here is overblowing the amount of risk. Because again, if the medical intervention, say, resulted in 99% of people who got it, it didn't fix their leg issue and left them with a permanent limp, well, then that would be a medical intervention that wouldn't be very good, would it? Conversely, if you had a surgical procedure that allowed you to do 99% of your operations successfully, it addresses the underlying problem and doesn't result in a lifelong limp, well, that would be pretty good, actually. That would be pretty wonderful. Like, people would give that the green light. And even though there's a 1% failure rate, people wouldn't be like, "Oh, well, we need to get rid of this medical intervention. It's just too dangerous." But people do that with transgender medical interventions all the time, nonstop. Because again, the rate of detransition for people who like are going through being trans, the rate of detransition is something like 2%. Like, it is absurdly low. It might even be like 1.5%. And of that 1.5%, over like 80% of them, I think it might even be close to 90% of them, detransition not because they think their decision to transition was wrong. They detransition, but because of society rejecting them, because of rejection of their friends and family, because they lose their jobs, and they decide, "Oh, well, you know, I literally can't live if I'm openly trans, so I'll just get my job back or get a new job in my field and, you know, just be myself on the weekends or at home, you know? I'll wait until I retire and then I can be myself." You know? That's what winds up happening for the vast majority of people who detransition. And also, the majority of people who detransition wind up retransitioning later. So the issue is then the 0.01% of people who detransition, and obviously there should be efforts to minimize how many people need to detransition. You know, obviously that's the case. Obviously, we want any medical intervention to get as close to a 100% success rate as possible. But just because the success rate isn't 100% isn't a good enough reason to suspend that operation or intervention entirely.
And minimize the instances of that happening as much as humanly possible. At the same time, for teenagers who legitimately are transgender, I don't want to cause harm to them.
And to be clear, Gamer G, I think that there should be attention paid to detransitioners in order to develop like medical interventions that help them once they decide to detransition and like help them to like live normal, healthy, happy lives. I think that should be a thing that exists in the medical field. It's just that the overwhelming mainstream media focus on detransitioners gives people a very skewed perspective on how successful transgender medical interventions are. They are, in fact, one of the most successful forms of medical intervention on any medical issue in the medical literature.
Entirely banning a medical process that could be beneficial to them. My point is, I don't believe that it is up to me to decide. I don't believe it's up to anyone in this room to decide what the right course of action is for them. I think it's up to the parents, the doctors and, you know, the individual in question themselves.
I have a question. It's sort of a macro conversation.
Are you leaving this topic?
No, I'm not leaving this topic whatsoever. I'm actually staying right here. By the way, shout out to Dr. Kasparian, all the work that he's done with the youth in Asia. That's Booyakasha with everything that's been going on with that, with youth in Asia. But to me, and I want to stay here, this isn't a pivot. This is such a...
What a surreal bit. Shout out to Dr. Kevorkian. What the fuck?
ridiculous distraction. What do I mean? Okay, there's so much going on in the world. Okay, we're at $33 trillion in debt. We got runaway inflation. Interest rates are to the roof. People can barely make their car payments. Mortgages, everything that's going on there, foreclosures. We're on the verge of a regional conflict that can go to World War III. And in America today, we're debating what the fuck is a woman?
No,
what is happening in American society that we're even having this long, elongated discussion where it's poignant and it's very like
you hear what this guy's saying? Do you?
Tangible, like
I'm worried.
Birthing person, woman. It's like the rest of the world is looking at us and they're laughing that America can't even get their shit together. This beacon of hope, this beacon of light, this shining city on a hill, this amazing situation that we have in America, and we're having hour-long debates. What is a woman?
Right.
China's laughing at us. Russia's laughing at us. And here we are, very smart people, very informed people, and we're having deep discussions of whether Anna over here is actually a woman or not, or she's a birthing person.
What's your question?
So my question is, why are we so preoccupied with this? Is this not one big distraction? The culture wars,
you're
the identity.
distracting from the topic.
But
no.
I'm not distracted.
But you
from
are
the
though.
topic.
You are though.
I'm asking why this is such a
But
big
I don't want to. I
topic.
don't want to go to that topic. I want to stay on this topic. That's a complete different topic. Let us transition away from this. I'm still on this topic. The question we're asking right now is very important. We've gone through trans.
Oh, Pat. You know, I do enjoy Patrick Bet-David shitting on his co-hosts. I do enjoy that.
She's not for the transition. She's for the medicine pro-hormones. In some cases, then I bring in Kevorkian. Is that something that we should allow parents to do if the kid wants to take their lives because it's hard? She's then saying no. Then it goes down to some people from trans are having true mental issues that they're going through, which is the next thing you said. Fair, I'm with it. But I want to know why. The other day, I have this guy at the Rob. What's our friend's name that we talked to? The plumber, legendary plumber Eric Hecker, who's a Raytheon whistleblower. I can't wait for this to come out. I'm telling you, you will be entertained the entire time. But he said something very interesting. He said, you know, what is mental illness? And how long has mental illness been around? He says, you realize
this is what I
if
think
you
is
have
a limited worldview.
Discordant Vol, thank you for the 5 tier 2 subs. My goodness, that is incredibly generous. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
have heart issues, we can show you have heart issues.
Yeah.
You got a murmur, or you got blood clot,
High blood pressure.
or you got high blood pressure. There is data to say that. He said, how do we measure bipolar? How do we measure, depression? How do we measure all? And he's going through asking all these questions. And he says, how do we know that? We don't know that. So you go to a doctor. What is actually...
What? When we're talking about mental issues, we measure those by like persistence of symptoms and self-reporting of symptoms. So yeah, it's true. Someone could lie about all of their symptoms. But that doesn't happen. Very like the amount of times that happens is like infinitesimal, right? It's you go based on the persistence of the symptoms. If somebody is reporting that they are incredibly sad and thinking about wanting to kill themselves for prolonged periods of time, well, that would indicate an underlying problem, right? Like you don't just be like, well, just think more positively, buddy. Yeah, I wish I could be pretend. Yeah, just hey, look, you might be in the middle of a manic episode right now, but it's all in your head, bro. We can't actually quantify it. What is wrong with you? But I see where he's going with this. Like, he's going to essentially say, like, being trans isn't a quantifiable thing. Your level of transness isn't quantifiable. which is true to an extent. However, when we're talking about children in particular, children tend to have a fully formed gender identity by the age of 3 and will tend to begin operating on that gender identity as they get older from there. And obviously it will change and a bit over time. It is malleable, like they can learn new things and incorporate that into their gender identity. However, ultimately, when therapists and psychological experts evaluate children and whether or not they might be trans, what they use as data points are persistence in identifying in this certain way, right? Over a long period of time, which is typically why doctors will require in these gender programs and these gender clinics will require follow-up visits consistently over a period of like 2 to 3 years in order to validate whether or not medical intervention for like hormone blockers or HRT is necessary and warranted, right? Like that's ultimately how that is determined. It is by the persistence of the child in question and the consistency in evaluation. Like I keep telling people, I knew that I wanted to be a woman when I was 8. I was basically told no because it wasn't acceptable by my stepdad and had to live with that for almost 30 years. Yeah. You know, like... Oh, God. Oh, yeah, I guess this does link up with what Matt Walsh said today. The facts say that the entire medical basis for antidepressants is a thoroughly debunked myth, and millions of people were drugged based on that myth. Insane, by the way. Because ultimately, conservatives want to blame everything on Big Pharma without actually doing anything to, you know, advocate against the power of Big Pharma. You know, Matt Walsh is out here today trying to say that Big Pharma is perpetuating mass shootings in order to medicate more people. That's his current conspiracy theory is all about that, which is insane. And also, it exists entirely to distract, and it will perpetuate through these conservative circles, by the way. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, each one of these conservative talking heads, these ghouls like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, want to deflect from the very obvious reality, which is that people listen to what they say and what they believe on their shows. And then they make decisions accordingly. And if you're talking about like the need to eradicate, you know, certain groups of people, the need to strike back against the government, it's not a surprise when someone picks up a gun and starts operating on that. When you continuously call queer and trans people dangerous to society who are, you know, pedophiles in disguise trying to manipulate your children, it's not that surprising to see a conservative who believes in what Matt Walsh and what Ben Shapiro believe and believes them at face value. It's not weird for them to operate on that as if it's true, pick up a gun, and go and mow down a bunch of queer people. It's like if you believed that all queer people were legitimately pedophiles, that's not a weird decision for someone to make in that worldview. And like, that's the issue. Is that the people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro are paid to create that worldview to bamboozle conservatives into not realizing who their real enemies are, which is rich people who pay people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, frankly. Oh, God. Here we go. Back to Patrick Bet-David here.
Actually, the test for a doctor to know that you have bipolar ADHD. What's the test? He's just asking you a few questions.
Well, yeah.
What are you dealing with? What do you go? There is no test. There is no data. Your blood scored this or so I'm sitting there listening to this guy. I'm saying, first of all, I don't, okay, maybe interesting point. But then what has this led to? It's led to a multi-billion-dollar product, Big Pharma. Okay? So how profitable...
Yes, Big Pharma didn't exist until psychology was invented. Psychology was invented by Big Pharma to sell more drugs. They definitely didn't need to sell drugs prior to that. Nope, not at all. By the way, I just want to say this is on par with someone saying, how do you know what the doctor actually knows? How do you know what tests they actually did? Sure, they took some of your blood, but did you see them run the test? Did you see them actually put that vial in? And did you see the little bits of your blood add up to the different numbers? Those doctors are selling you snake oil, my friend. That's why you've got to try my ancient technique that's been handed down by my ancestors. Here, spritz your rash and your sores with this bottle of Windex, and it will fix out all of your problems. Just drink this antifreeze, and all the pain will go away. I know this because of my deep emotional connection with Mother Nature. Like that's on par with what he's talking about here. Like, to pretend that psychology doesn't exist, to pretend that like medical interventions that improve like psychological well-being don't exist is insane. It is insane on the level of like that guy down at the hardware store who's trying to tell you that like doctors are trying to cheat you out of money because it's all one big scam. Like, oh, Patrick Bet David got super rich off of abusing the healthcare finance industry. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, he got rich profiting off of a Big Pharma. My big fat Greek wedding reference. Ka-ching, you nailed it. Good job, Andrew S.
Are these transitions? How profitable are these puberty blocker products? By the way, I know you're saying...
Yeah, by the way, how profitable are these puberty blockers? Guys, HRT and puberty blockers are like the cheapest drugs in the universe. Okay? They like if you're on HRT and you're like a trans woman, like your estrogen tablets are mass produced, like because they are used by cis women as well. Testosterone, mass produced because it's used for cis men as well. Like, puberty blockers, mass produced because they're also used by cisgender people. And again, a lot of these drugs have multiple uses, like for reducing acne or helping with menopause. Like, these things are some of the most common drugs on the market. So again, the conspiracy theory that like, oh, they just want to sell more drugs to trans people, they're creating a new market, that's just insanity. You don't know what you're talking about, or you're being intentionally disingenuous.
You know, why are we talking about this? There's other things.
4,000 kids per year are on puberty blockers. They're not getting rich off of trans kids on puberty blockers. Yeah, not to mention the incredibly small sample size you're working with.
Going on in the world. For people that have kids, this is a major concern to them because their kids are being fed this bullshit on a daily basis at public schools, and parents are concerned.
What do you think your kids are being fed on a daily basis? Like, what do I genuinely want to know how these people like walk into like a public school? Like, do they like look at the wall and there's like a, I don't know, like a rainbow mural of like, children who put their hands in paint and like put it up on the wall, and there's just like a rainbow colored mural of like children's hands, and they look at that and they're like, the homosexual agenda. What are they doing? How you are the problem in this equation, sir. Like, you walk into like a public high school and there's a big sign that says all are welcome here, and they're like, that sign's about the transes. Like what are you doing? How have you allowed your life to be so dictated by this hateful worldview that, like, you're just upset? Like, you walk into a preschool and you see a sign that says, like, sharing is caring, and you're like, oh, smash the gays! This is teaching communism to the kids! What is wrong with you, right? Like, when they say that's what is being taught to children all day, every day, that's what's being shoved down their throats. What they really mean is, like, oh, your kid is learning basic skills of, like, empathy and how to, like, socially interact with people different than them. Oh, the horror.
Very concerned in some markets. I'm not concerned at this point because I've been talking to my kids about this stuff very closely, and we have certain resources. Not everybody has certain resources to put them in public schools. So for me, all I'm going back to is when you were saying the depression, you know, where people are at. If you work with me,
Yeah, but the sex reassignment surgery isn't provided to children. This is for adults. Like, the sex reassignment surgery market size was worth more than $623 million in 2022. It's projected to register over 11.5% CAGR between 2023 and 2032. Growing prevalence of gender dysphoria and awareness regarding sex change surgeries will influence market expansion. Yeah. On this topic, have you heard about the fact that they're testing weight loss drugs on kids as young as 6? I hadn't. I'm not surprised. Not surprised. I would be more concerned about PragerU for kids. Well, yeah, but they think that that's based in good, you know?
like if let's just say, I'm talking about this yesterday, Melva, our nanny, 13 years, she uses the word.
Yeah, by the way, notice how he was talking about like puberty blockers and HRT, and then what he threw up on screen was for sex reassignment surgery, which is obviously far more complicated. It's like one of the most complicated surgeries to do, and it's not done on children. So, wow. Way to not back up your point there, bud.
Pobrecito with the kids.
If it's so profitable, if the puberty blockers and the HRT are so profitable, PBD, why didn't you show those numbers on screen? That's so weird.
Pobrecito. I'm like, what the hell is this?
Like a little poor baby.
But I'm like, Melva, they're not poor. These kids are not poor. Don't tell them they're poor. And Jen will say, poor Brooklyn. I said, babe, Brooklyn is not poor.
She has a cell phone.
She doesn't have a cell phone, but
joking.
Put that word in her mouth. Certain words we use, that's the parent's responsibility. You will.
What? Okay, wait. This is actually insane. We don't use the word poor around our child. She'll grow up thinking that she's a poor. We don't want her to know anything aside from our vast amounts of wealth. What are you talking? Poor Brooklyn. Brooklyn isn't poor. How dare you call it that? What the hell?
Allowed those words to become real, and the parent didn't stop it. Tom, for you with 2 daughters, you're seeing this exchange in this topic. I'll transition because I know Adam wants to talk other topics.
No,
we're gonna get
not
to
at all. This is important to discuss.
What is your thoughts when you're hearing Anna and I discuss this?
Well, I have a unique perspective. My wife is a career teacher.
Who the fuck is this guy? Just coming out of the bushes, I guess.
Educator. She's taught in public schools, LA Unified Public School, as a matter of fact, for 10 years, and she's taught in private schools since. And I have 2 teenage daughters. And so I have a house full of portable reproduction units. And we...
I'm sorry, Holsky.
Took me a second, but
I don't know why that would
How they
be.
feel about being called that.
They're watching their pals.
If anybody has a couch I can sleep on for the next couple of days,
I
let
got
me
you,
know.
Tom. I got you.
But in all seriousness, what is happening in schools is kind of dangerous. We've gone to a movement.
Wait, did I miss something? I got distracted by Holsky.
And so I have a house full of portable reproduction units. And
The fuck? I guess he's saying that in reference to the earlier part of the conversation about birthing people. I think, okay, no. I think what he's saying is he's making a joke trying to reference back to earlier in the conversation about birthing persons, and he's trying to highlight how ridiculous that phrase is by using it in this context. Okay. Yeah, he's knocking the term birthing person while, again, simultaneously not understanding it, and also the other people on this panel who don't understand it are laughing along with it. Okay, gotcha.
And we
Well, it didn't come off well because it was a conservative joke, and honestly, conservative jokes tend to go over left-leaning heads, and or under our feet, as the case might be. It's a low bar.
Took me a second, but okay.
I don't know how they'd feel about being called that.
They're laughing their
well,
pissed.
if anybody has a couch I can sleep on for the next couple of days,
I
let
got
me
you,
know.
Tom. I got you.
But in all seriousness, what is happening in schools is kind of dangerous. We've gone to a movement of ratify and separate. It is in the public schools, is ratify what they feel, whatever they feel, and then separate them from parental decisions. It is an intentional, it's a program, it's what the public schools want at high school. We want to ratify what you're saying and separate you from your parents. Whereas mental health
Well, no. Part of what you're describing is just called growing up. Like, kids grow up and they become like their own individual people. That often starts happening in high school and college.
experts will tell you you want to, process and counsel. And that involves bring the parents in. But that's not what the school.
Yeah, but the thing is, the decision to bring the parents in is generally made by the student. If students don't feel safe expressing their gender identities or sexualities to their parents, that's because they have a good reason to believe that that is not a safe thing. And assuming that the default is that it is safe, assuming safety for these kids can do irreparable harm to their social lives, to their financial lives. Again, there is a reason why disproportionately there's I think something along the lines of 60 to 70% of homeless youth are LGBTQ. And they get outed to their parents in a wide variety of ways. But then they get kicked out of their homes, and then they have to live on the street. The reason that schools don't out kids to their parents is because this is a known issue. It's because this is such a known issue that kids are either going to be cut off financially or, not have a roof over their heads or be abused. This is such a prevalent problem that schools adopted a policy to not out kids for those reasons.
Schools want. And so I see it on that side where I can see schools that are actively.
And again, what he's saying right here is that schools are trying to indoctrinate children into the woke hive mind cult. That's what he's trying to say here.
And administrations and public schools that are actively trying to separate the kids from their parents in the first place. And this is another way they do it. Rather than processing and counseling through, and you don't have to come down on the kid, but it's processing. You know what? Let's sit down with the counselor and your parents and let's talk about this. Let's get you in a safe place. Let's not have your dad turn, what? You want to be what? No, let's turn down the temperature.
Yeah, but again, even if that is the case, even if you're like, oh, well, you can out the kids in a safe way, what happens after the counselor is gone? What happens in the house? What happens the next day? you can't have a counselor around for that when like the legal guardian of this child like is going to be left alone with them for prolonged periods of time. They might be in an incredibly dangerous situation, and you, the school district, just facilitated that.
In that room, and let's embrace the child. Hey, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Now let's process it and let's counsel through, because most of the suicides come from isolation. It's the isolation in their own mind, and it's one word, it's hopeless.
Well, most of the suicides occur from both isolation. Isolation plays a role. The other part of that, though, is parental acceptance. If you have an actively hostile parent, that increases the suicidality of that trans kid, like, exponentially. If you have one supportive parent in a household, it reduces the suicidality of that trans kid down to normal levels or below. The isolation is from being rejected by friends and family. It's not from them just not coming out to anybody. It's from being actively rejected by friends and family.
Word hopeless is what is tied to the majority of the teen suicides. And so how
exactly do you become hopeless? You become hopeless by exhausting all of your other avenues to which you would turn to find hope. You become hopeless by experiencing familial rejection, by experiencing the rejection of your social circles, by becoming jobless, by being fired and rejected by your colleagues. That's where the isolation comes from. They are explicitly being isolated by policies that out them to their parents. If they aren't feeling safe enough to out themselves to their parents, they aren't feeling safe enough for the school to out them to their parents, certainly.
How do they feel hopeless? Who is around them helping them feel hopeful, trying to embrace them, trying to process, trying to get to the center of where this is? Well,
and by the way, you can be a parent and you can think that you have the best interests of your kid at heart. But if then you know that they're trans and you're trying everything you can to detrans them, to like send them to conversion therapy, or to, work camps or military school, like these are things that destroy people and kill kids under the guise of like trying to accept it.
Never had a boyfriend, I've been really depressed. Sometimes they're going down bad decision lines. It's not I've always felt this way since I was 8 years old. No, they're going down some decision flows and other things that are happening socially.
The problem that I have is the assumption that like all parents are going to freak out and be super abusive to their kids. Yeah.
It's so common that LGBTQ people make up the majority of homeless youth. It's not and by the way, if you had a policy, like we'll just run down this real quick. If you had a policy that required schools to out LGBTQ youth to their parents, right? The vast majority of parents wouldn't disown their kids, wouldn't beat their kids, wouldn't try to murder their kids. That's true. However, there is a significant percentage, and I don't know if that's 10% of parents, 5% of parents, who would kick their kids out. Who would beat their kids? Who would try and kill their kids? And I'm sorry, if that number is even 1% of parents, we're talking about tens of thousands of kids being put at risk, being kicked out of their homes, being beaten, and having their lives threatened by their parents. Yes, kids suddenly being homeschooled, sent to conversion therapy camps. Honestly, I consider kicking your kids out to be no different than starving them to death. Yeah, no, 100%. The assumption isn't that the majority of parents are going to disown their kids, try and kill their kids, try and beat their kids. The assumption is that there is a non-insignificant number of parents who would do those things, which would result in a significant number of children being harmed, tangibly, directly, or even indirectly.
If they find out that their child might be transgender. I just don't think that's the right mentality to have. I do think that there are some maybe like religious fundamentalist parents who could actually freak out. And so again, it is really important to ensure that whatever policy is implemented, that there is consideration for children or for teens who might come from a family like that. However, no one loves these kids more than their parents for the most part.
For sure.
And I just know, look, I don't have my own kids. I have nieces that I'm very, very close with, my brother's daughters. And the idea that anyone in our family would be abusive to these kids if one of them legitimately like identified as transgender is ridiculous. And I think my brother and sister-in-law should have the right as
like I'm sorry. I'm sorry, just real quick. This is from the Trevor Project, based on 2021 national survey data on LGBTQ youth mental health. 28% of LGBTQ youth reported experiencing homelessness or housing instability at some point in their lives. That number, 44% of Native and Indigenous LGBTQ youth have experienced homelessness or housing instability. 16% of Asian American Pacific Islander youth, 27% of white LGBTQ youth, 27% of Latina LGBTQ youth, 26% of Black LGBTQ youth, and 36% multiracial LGBTQ youth. Again, this is colossal percentage. One in 3 overall. Almost 1 in 3 queer children experience homelessness and housing instability. %16 of LGBTQ youth reported that they had slept away from parents or caregivers because they ran away from home, with more than half, 55%, reporting that they ran away from home because of mistreatment or fear of mistreatment due to their LGBTQ identity. Yeah. I'm sorry, this is an issue I care about a lot. And it is infuriating to hear. Again, why do so many LGBTQ youth experience homelessness? It's not because 30% of LGBTQ youth live in abject poverty. Let me put it that way.
Parents to be able to be there for their daughters.
When was this interview? This was like 2 days ago.
If one of them is going through something like that, you know what I'm saying? It's just like this preemptive notion that the parents are going to be awful.
I want you to see
I
this
agree with
chart.
that. And remember,
Oh, wait. Sorry. One update. Finding another. Yeah. Here's from the Center of American Progress. This number is lower, but 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBT. Yeah. LGBTQ, and this is the prisonpolicy.org. LGBTQ youth usually face homelessness after fleeing abuse and lack of acceptance at home because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Once homeless and with few resources at hand, LGBTQ youth are pushed towards criminalized behaviors such as drug sales, theft, or survival sex, which increase the risk of arrest and detainment. Which is why homeless LGBTQ youth have a much higher rate of incarceration in the United States.
you can go into these public schools and it'll be like, don't tell your parents, they'll freak out. There is an assumption that's at the front of it. I agree with you 100%.
I want you to look at this chart, Tom. U.S. sex reassessment surgery market.
Markets.
If you guys are looking for great investment, this is fantastic.
Man, it's so crazy that it's really just so crazy that you're talking about medical interventions with children and you keep talking about U.S. sex assignment surgery markets going up, which has nothing to do with the services and medical procedures available to children. That's wild. Also, just yeah, this graph, by the way, exists for all medical interventions going forward into the future. Can anyone take a guess as to why every single medical intervention chart goes up over time? Can any of you take a wild stab at it? Anyone in chat? It's because the population goes up. It's because population grows over time. Oh, it's crazy. It's population growth. We cracked the case. It's because over time, more people exist. More people means more medical interventions. Yeah. Oh my god. We cracked the secret of... Oh god, dude.
It's serious, Pat. Seriously.
Fantastic investment.
Michael
right
Burry
there.
over here.
Look at these procedures and how it's climbing year by year.
So you're
by year.
thinking that the increase is really driven by the health industry?
I do have to say, given Patrick Bet-David's past investment in the medical field, I would love to see if he's invested. You know, he's a money guy. You know, he talks about being motivated by the money. You know, he talks about being motivated by the wild amount of wealth you can make by investing. I would love to see if he's invested in U.S. sex reassignment surgery market. I would love to see if he's invested in that. You know, he's saying it's just such a good investment. It's just such a good investment. Then how could he not, huh? I would kill. I know there's no way that there's like, I know there's no way I'd get that information, but it would be very funny.
My God, I mean,
Interesting.
Look, think of, and by the way, I don't think I would consider as one of the possibilities. I'm not saying this is it.
Oh yeah, by the way, yeah, just keep an eye on this chart, okay? Take it in. You know, one thing that's pretty funny that he hasn't really mentioned that much or at all. So the market growth here for US sex reassignment surgery market is 11.2%. Revenue sorry. Just oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah. Revenue is expected to show an annual growth rate from 2023 to 2027 of 10.4% overall. So again, the growth of this that he is showing on screen is in line with the growth of literally the entire healthcare industry. This is just the population growing. Hey, wait.
Oh my God! I mean,
interesting.
Look, think. And by the way, I don't think I would consider as one of the possibilities. I'm not saying this is it. I'm a guy that wants to weigh out and do odds, right? This is a very profitable business. Like when you think about how much Prozac makes, how much these pharmaceutical companies make, and then so the business model is this.
Then
Guys,
think of how much money the estrogen companies make.
let's make $60 billion and we'll pay $3 billion in fines in 10 years. What a great business model. Okay, so let's go make $80 billion and let's set aside 10% for fines. That's going to come back because we're going to screw a lot of people's lives. But we already made $80 billion. So put the 10% in a lawsuit that's going to come in 10 years. Here's the $8 billion. Guys, very responsible CFO. What a great job you did. And we'll call this $8 billion a marketing expense. It's not a marketing expense. It's a future lawsuit that's going to come that you screwed a lot of people's lives. Okay,
Yeah.
so this pharma thing.
Just as an FYI, because someone else mentioned it. Someone else mentioned it. Here, let's see. Interesting. Interesting. The Viagra segment is expected to grow fastest during the forecasted period of 2023 to 2032. So it will grow the fastest in the segment of the market with the largest revenue share. Oh, that's crazy. There's a lot of money to be made here in Viagra. It's crazy. When you think about it, the entire medical industry has really been telling men that if they can't get hard, they're worthless. And they're indoctrinating men, young boys even, to think that not being able to sexually perform is somehow an infringement on their masculinity. It's giving them a lot of issues. And it's one of the most popular drugs in America. But no. Big Pharma's only after the transes.
Is not like a hypothetical. There's so many books written on people from Big Pharma that left the industry, were sick of it, and they said, this is really what's going on behind closed doors, and you got to kind of pay attention to it. By the way, very profitable, and typically these guys, if you look at lobbyists, which industry has the biggest lobbyists? Can you pull up the biggest industry of lobbyists? Biggest industry of lobbyists. There's insurance is going to be up there, but you'll see pharma's up there.
Oh,
there you go. Look at the number right there. Pharmaceutical and health product industry has spent the most lobbying over the last 24 years. I think you and I may be on the same page with lobbyists.
I wonder though. I wonder why he's not looking up what the pharmaceutical and health product industry was lobbying for. Or rather, what they were lobbying against. I wonder if anyone can think of anything over the last decade or so that the pharmaceutical industry would want to lobby against, as if its life depended on it. Maybe something called Medicare for all or single payer. I don't know. Or bills designed to allow the government to negotiate down drug prices. Really makes you think.
These guys are going around like getting massive paychecks, making all the money in the world, and they're imposing laws.
I'm not cutting you off. Right. What a great point, because I was just writing here, question marks. Why? Why the push? Why all this? Big Pharma is, Pat, just great example, because why is the left all the...
This guy gives me... I'm uncomfortable because I'm at a party and there's a guy in the corner doing way too much cocaine, and it's this guy. That's the vibes he gives me.
All the government pushing it so hard now.
$5.2 billion spent on lobby in the last 24 years. That's freaking insane. $356 million was just in 2021.
And that push is working, Pat. Guess
5.1 billion. That's a lot. Spending 5.17 billion over the past 24 years. The pharmaceutical and health products industry has far outpaced all others in lobbying spending. The industry spent a record 356.6 million on lobbying in 2021, nearly 30% more in nominal terms than it did in 2009 amid debates about the Affordable Care Act. This includes spending on behalf of drug manufacturers as well as sellers of medical products, nutritional and dietary supplements. The main drug makers lobbying group, Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, remained the biggest spender within the healthcare sector in 2021 with outlays of $30.4 million. Now, I just have to say, can anyone think of a major medical event during which a massive amount of lobbying would have occurred in order to, I don't know, secure lucrative government contracts or, reduce the amount of government interference in setting prices for things that a large majority of people are going to use, like, say, a COVID vaccine of some kind? Definitely don't look at any stories recently of COVID vaccines suddenly becoming more expensive. Don't look up anything like that. About Turner raised eyebrows last week, including from Congress opens in a new tab or would... okay, well, that just... When it announced plans to increase the price of its COVID-19 mRNA vaccine by more than 400%. I wonder. That's crazy, dog.
1 out of 4 high school students in America identifies LGBTQ plus to whatever they're adding.
Well, I think they're surfing the wave that has been made by
purpose.
the hyper liberal left on this. I think they're...
Wait, what?
America identifies LGBTQ plus to whatever they're adding.
I think they're...
Oh, yeah, he's saying 1 in 4 high school students are now identifying as queer, and that's a problem. And it's really very simple. Kids and people in general are just being given more ability to explore what their gender and sexuality are, which means that even if they are ultimately straight, they still are willing to explore the possibility that they could be queer, which puts them into like the LGBTQ category. If you're questioning your sexuality, that makes you more likely to say, oh, I might be bisexual. Or if you're questioning your gender identity, you might be like, oh, well, maybe I'm non-binary. Like, that's why the numbers are so much larger. It's not necessarily that so many more people are coming out because they're like trans, but it is the case that a lot of people are finding themselves within a wider queer community because a lot of people are trying to figure out if they are queer or not. And that's totally fine and healthy, actually.
Surfing the wave that has been made by
purpose.
the hyper liberal left on this. I think they're surfing the wave, but they are sure exploiting it and lobbying to it because EPS, earnings per share, is a sexy mistress.
Follow the money. You always say that.
Let's go to the next story. Unless if you have final thoughts, got final thoughts, I'll give it to you. Unless if we'll go to the next story.
Yeah,
California.
the final thing I'll say is I think that our issue with legalized bribery leads to a lot of the distrust and a lot of the you know, I'm not saying you're engaging in conspiracies, but there's a lot of conspiratorial thinking overall in the country right now, and I think it's mostly driven by the distrust.
I'm not saying you, the guy who just said psychology is a tool of, like the entire idea of mental illness is a tool by Big Pharma to sell you more drugs. I'm not saying you're conspiratorial.
Trust that we have in our institutions, and I think that distrust really comes from the fact that we don't really have politicians that are looking out for us at the moment.
You know who
we
else
have
does-
politicians who are they're literally investing in individual stocks after getting briefed in closed-door briefings on various issues around the world and in the country. Then they turn around and they trade stocks based on that information. That's insider trading. You have money in politics. You have these corporations. You have these lobbyists padding the pockets, or the coffers, I should say, of these politicians.
Yeah.
So when you see all of this policy being passed that doesn't actually benefit ordinary Americans, that leads to the anger, that leads to the distrust, and I think it's really at the heart of a lot of the problems we have in this country.
Wait, you mean to tell me, Anna, that Nancy Pelosi didn't make her $150 million by luck?
I don't know. I don't know if you guys know this,
Yeah.
but Nancy Pelosi is like a genius when it comes to the markets.
Weird.
I mean, her
husband Paul is
predictive skills.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one,
That was actually shockingly bad. Like, I know I shouldn't be shocked. That was incredibly bad. Do I have anything that I can use to wrap up here? Like, wrap up this segment? Ultimately, a lot of that was just misinformed gibberish. Like, when Anna was talking, there was at least like a trail of logic that she was like wrongly applying, obviously, but like you could see it. She was surrounded by chuckle fucks the entire time, and I just there was no pushback. I don't know, man. It seems to me like she went on there to have her ego stroked and to, frankly, complain about, the mean trans people on the internet who just want to have inclusive language in medical environments so that, we don't die. So, yeah, very disappointing stuff. Very disappointing.